On New Year's Eve, the heavy oak door of my childhood home was slammed shut in my face. The words from my parents, cold and sharp, echoed in the frigid air. "Don't come back." Just then, a cascade of fireworks erupted across the sky, bathing the vast Colorado plains in brilliant bursts of red and gold. I was left standing on the frozen porch, a thick envelope filled with bank statements clutched in my numb fist. That's when a gleaming black SUV crunched up the gravel driveway. The door opened and a woman stepped out, her silver hair catching the wind. A woman everyone in my family had sworn was dead, holding a leather-bound notebook. She walked toward me, her gaze locking onto mine. Her voice cut through the celebratory pops and booms. "Tell me," she murmured, "who has been spending my money in your name?" My name is Clara Sterling. I'm 35 and I work as a geological surveyor in Denver, a good 3-hour drive from the family ranch in Durango. My professional life is a world of precision and data, forecasting mineral yields for mining giants and managing survey crises from a quiet office. But every holiday, I feel this gravitational pull back to that same house, the same suffocating guilt, and the same slow, insidious bleed on my finances. This time was meant to be the end of it. I had arrived with undeniable proof, ready for a final confrontation. Instead, I found myself locked out in the cold. If you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family, if you've ever suspected someone close was taking advantage of your trust, I want to hear about it. Drop your city in the comments below, share a piece of your story, and be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for the full story of my revenge. You are not going to believe what happened next. I drove back to Denver through the immense darkness of the plains, the wind howling and buffeting my car as if trying to push me back. I had the heater on full blast, but the bone-deep chill from that porch seemed to have settled into my very marrow. My hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, my mind replaying the scene on a loop. The brilliant, mocking fireworks, the finality of the slamming door, and the impossible image of the woman with the notebook. By the time I finally pulled into my designated spot in the parking garage beneath my high-rise apartment building, a wave of profound exhaustion washed over me. I stumbled inside, dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my boots, and made a beeline for the kitchen counter. My laptop was waiting for me, its screen dark and silent. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. First, I needed answers. I logged into the corporate banking portal, the one linked to my survey contracts with Summit Geospatial Solutions. The dashboard loaded with agonizing slowness, each percentage point on the loading bar ratcheting up my anxiety. Finally, the page resolved, and a glaring red banner flashed across the top of the screen. High priority alert. New lion recorded. My stomach plunged. With a trembling hand, I clicked on the notification. The document that unfolded on my screen was like a meticulously crafted trap. It was a loan for a staggering $175,000, disbursed just 3 days prior. The secured party was some obscure lending entity based out of Nevada, a shell company by the looks of it. And then I saw the collateral. My own name stared back at me from the page, cold and clinical. Clara Sterling's professional assets, including all project forecasts, client contracts, and intellectual property at Summit Geospatial Solutions. They had gambled with my entire career, my geological models, my confidential risk assessment reports, every bonus I had ever earned by sweating over seismic data in windowless offices late into the night. I frantically scrolled down to the authorization section, my heart hammering against my ribs. And there it was, a digital signature, a perfect replica of my own handwriting, dated 8 years earlier. 8 years. The exact same year I had made the fateful decision to add my parents, Diana and Richard, to my primary household account. It was supposed to be for emergencies only, a safety net. My mother, Diana, had insisted it was for family stability. I had never, ever signed anything like this document. The blood pounded in my ears as I navigated back and opened the transaction history for that joint account. What I found was a detailed chronicle of a decade-long betrayal. The withdrawals revealed a pattern. Monthly drains, always structured to be just under the $10,000 mark to avoid automatic bank flags. Charges from a host of online casinos, all under my father Richard's name. He was perpetually chasing that one big win ever since his freight business had gone under. Then there were the endless streams of luxury subscription boxes and designer clothing shipments for my mother, Diana, all sent directly to the Durango Ranch. And Leo, my 26-year-old brother, who was practically fused to his high-end gaming setup, was siphoning off hundreds, sometimes thousands at a time, for virtual weapon skins, in-game currency, and premium battle passes. I started cross-referencing the dates, and a sick feeling of dread coalesced in my stomach. The year I landed my very first major contract, the one for forecasting copper deposits in Arizona, was the year the account was opened. It wasn't a coincidence. The month my first significant bonus came through, a reward for successfully managing a survey crisis during a landslide. A $5,000 household repair charge appeared, vanishing from the account. The timing aligned perfectly with the delivery of Diana's brand new set of custom patio furniture. Leo's most extravagant splurge, a top-of-the-line, custom-built PC rig costing nearly $8,000, corresponded exactly with the week I was promoted to senior surveyor. These weren't emergencies. They were habits. They were lifestyles. My success had become the fuel for their vices: Richard's late-night digital poker tables, Diana's insatiable online shopping carts, and Leo's sprawling digital empires. That joint account wasn't a safety net. It was a pipeline, systematically siphoning away my earnings while I was 3 hours away, building a life I thought was my own. I pulled up the lender's contact information. It was a P.O. box in Nevada, linked to a shell company with no digital footprint. The loan money had been wired directly into the household account. I checked the current balance, just over $40,000, even after another recent wave of spending. A $2,000 casino withdrawal from the previous day, a new designer coat for Diana, Leo's latest pre-order game bundle. My hands were shaking uncontrollably as I took screenshots of everything. This lien wasn't just about debt. It was a direct threat to my professional clearance, my contracts, my entire reputation in an industry where trust and integrity are everything. One single default, and Summit Geospatial could freeze my access, terminate my projects, and blacklist me. Years of relentless grinding, of sacrificing weekends and holidays would be gone, erased. All because they treated my name and my hard-earned success like an open tab at a bar. I leaned back in my chair, the screen's harsh glow illuminating my face. The woman with the notebook, my grandmother, Eleanor Vance. The story I had been told my whole life was that she had been lost at sea 15 years ago during a storm, a boating accident off the coast. No body was ever recovered. The probate was handled quickly, and her trust funds were distributed, with the bulk going to her only daughter, my mother, Diana. But she had been standing right there on the porch tonight, impossibly alive, asking the very question that was now burning a hole in my mind. Who authorized this lien? Who had forged my signature? The answer was in Durango, hiding behind that slammed door. Just then, my phone buzzed with a bank notification. Withdrawal attempt blocked. The war had already begun, and I hadn't even realized I was on the battlefield. My phone buzzed once more in the oppressive silence of my apartment. An unknown number flashed on the screen, then it went silent. I stared at it, my pulse still galloping from the alert about the blocked withdrawal. A moment later, the same number called again. This time, I picked up. "Clara," a voice said, as steady and unyielding as steel. It was Eleanor, the ranch. "Now, and bring everything you have." The line went dead. There was no room for hesitation. I grabbed the stack of printouts from my printer, shoved them into a manila folder, and was out the door and back on the road in minutes. The drive back to Durango was a blur of empty highway, my headlights cutting a solitary path through the inky blackness. 3 hours later, I turned onto the familiar gravel path leading up to the old ranch house. The porch light was flickering, just as it always had. I used my own key to let myself in. They hadn't even bothered to change the locks. The living room was thick with the smell of stale coffee and a palpable, suffocating tension. Diana was perched stiffly on the edge of the worn-out couch, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her face arranged into a mask of wounded martyrdom that I knew all too well. Richard was pacing restlessly near the stone fireplace, his shirt untucked and his eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. Leo was slouched deep in the recliner, his thumbs flying across his phone screen, completely absorbed in his digital world. And at the head of the coffee table, like a judge presiding over a tribunal, stood Eleanor. Her notebook was open. She hadn't sat down. "We're settling this," she declared, her sharp gaze sweeping across each of them. The air in the room went completely still. Diana started to speak, her voice trembling with indignation. "Mother, this is utterly absurd. Clara shows up with these ridiculous papers dragging you into—" "Quiet," Eleanor commanded, and she flipped a page in her notebook. "Richard," she began, her voice like a razor's edge, "your online poker losses for the last quarter alone total $42,000, all wired directly from the household account. The memo line on the transfers reads, 'Truck maintenance.'" My father froze mid-pace, the color draining from his face. That was just a string of bad luck," he stammered. "The old rig needed parts." Eleanor turned another page, the sound echoing in the silence. "Diana, subscriptions to designer wardrobe services and jewelry drops, $38,000, all labeled as medical supplies for your supposed chronic back issues." My mother sat up straighter, her voice defensive. "Doctor visits are expensive. Oh, you know how my spine is." "Spare me," Eleanor cut her off and flipped another page. "Leo, in-game purchases, custom gaming setups, tournament entry fees, $29,000, all tagged as educational software." My brother's phone slipped from his grasp and clattered onto the floor. "It's networking, Grandma," he mumbled, looking at the floor. "I'm building skills for the future." Eleanor closed the notebook with a sharp, definitive snap. Over $109,000 in just the last 10 years, all of it drawn directly from Clara's deposits. "The trust I established for this family was meant to provide a foundation for independence, not to bankroll your indulgences." Diana leaned forward, her eyes pleading. "We are a family. She has plenty of money. That fancy job of hers—" "That fancy job pays for your habits," I cut in, my voice shaking with anger as I spread my own printouts across the coffee table. The casino logs, the online order receipts, the game transaction histories, all of it laid bare. The dates matching perfectly with the nights I remembered pulling all-nighters, fueled by caffeine and stress, to meet project deadlines. Richard rubbed the back of his neck, unable to meet my eyes. "Kiddo, we just hit a few rough patches. You were helping out." Leo scoffed from the recliner. "Yeah, right. It's not like you'd even notice it was gone, with your big shot surveyor salary." Eleanor's eyes locked onto him. "The gold bracelet you were flashing on social media last month. $5,000 from a jeweler in Aspen. Paid for with the bonus Clara received for her work on the Bingham Canyon project." Leo shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My girlfriend chipped in for that. "You're a liar," I said, pointing to the specific charge on the bank statement. Diana's voice began to climb in pitch, becoming shrill. "This is a character assassination. After everything we sacrificed for you, after we raised you in this house." Richard nodded in fervent agreement. "Ungrateful. We kept this ranch running for you." Eleanor calmly reopened her notebook and slid a single sheet of paper toward them. It was a copy of the lien. Was pledging Clara's entire career as collateral for a loan also part of keeping the ranch running? A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the room. Diana's eyes flickered toward Richard, who suddenly found the floor intensely interesting. Leo began picking furiously at his fingernails. I stood up, my legs feeling surprisingly steady. "No more," I said, my voice clear and firm. "The accounts, the access, the lies. This ends tonight." The wind howled outside, slamming the ranch door shut behind me as I stepped out into the night, my own copies from the notebook clutched in my hand. I tossed the folder onto the passenger seat of my car and sped off down the gravel road, a cloud of dust rising in my wake. The highway back to Denver felt even longer this time, each mile marker a small victory, each passing set of headlights a reminder of my isolation. But with every mile, a plan began to sharpen in my mind. By the time dawn broke, I was parked in my spot beneath the Summit Geospatial high-rise downtown, a large coffee in one hand and my packet of evidence in the other. Jessica Thorne's office was on the top floor, with glass walls that overlooked the sprawling rail yards, catching the first golden rays of morning light. She was the financial attorney my industry contacts had recommended, known for being aggressive and brilliant. She met me at the door herself, dressed in a sharp power suit, her handshake firm and her expression all business. "Sit," she said, motioning to a sleek conference table already set with legal pads and pens. I didn't waste any time. I spread out the printouts, the lien documents, the detailed account logs, the scans of the forged signature. She reviewed everything with a swift, practiced efficiency, her fingers flying across her keyboard as she cross-referenced information. "It's a fake power of attorney," she concluded after a few minutes, enlarging the digital signature on her monitor. The signature was lifted from an old refinance form you co-signed for the ranch mortgage years ago, and the notary stamp they used expired in 2003. That was their entry point. They used this fraudulent document to gain access. I nodded, feeling a small spark of hope. "The lien is against my business assets. How do we kill it?" Jessica leaned back in her chair, her expression confident. "We attack it on 4 fronts, a 4-pillar strategy. First, we revoke. I'll draft an immediate revocation of the fraudulent POA and file it with the county clerk and notify the bank. As of today, that document is dead." She was already typing as she laid out the plan. Second, we freeze. I'll place extended fraud alerts across all 3 major credit bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. No new accounts can be opened in your name without your explicit physical authorization. Your name is about to become a vault. Third, she continued, we reverse. We file for an immediate termination of the lien on the grounds of blatant fraud. The lender in Nevada will receive a cease and desist notice, and we'll file to have the public record corrected. Your projects, your assets, they remain untouched. And fourth, we contain. I'm filing for a temporary restraining order on that household account. Any attempted withdrawal will trigger an immediate contempt of court charge. We'll argue they are a significant flight risk based on their documented spending patterns. I opened my own laptop. I traced the IP addresses on the most recent logins, I said, pulling up the admin logs from the bank's portal. The origin is the ranch's modem in Durango. It's the same IP that was used for the lien application. Jessica's eyes sharpened. Perfect. That establishes coordination and intent. We'll include it in the TRO motion and file it ex parte, which means the judge can sign it immediately without them being present. She slid a business card across the table. Use this email address for any and all contact you receive from your relatives. Forward everything. Do not reply to them under any circumstances. I studied the strategy outlined on her screen. Revoke the key, freeze the well, reverse the damage, contain the bleed. What about the trust my grandmother mentioned? I asked. Jessica shrugged. That's Eleanor's battle. Our job is to secure your flank first. We move quietly and we move fast. An assistant knocked and entered, handing over a stack of freshly printed documents. Jessica signed where needed. A courier will have this at the clerk's office by noon. The bank's legal department gets the forgery affidavit this morning. The no contact rule starts now. She met my eyes, her gaze unwavering. From this point forward, they are your legal opponents, not your family. 2 mornings later, I was walking through the echoing quiet of the underground parking garage toward my truck. I stopped at the bank of mailboxes near the elevator to grab my mail. My box, number 3B, was hanging open, its hinge snapped. The contents had been pulled out and scattered across the concrete floor. My bills and junk mail were shredded. Lying on top of the mess was a single photograph of the ranch, torn neatly in half. Someone had broken in during the night. My pulse quickened as I gathered the pieces. The photo was of me at 16, standing proudly next to a wind turbine model I had built for a state science fair. On the back, a message was scrawled in thick red marker: "Stop digging." There was no signature, but the spiky, aggressive handwriting was unmistakably Leo's. It was the same handwriting from the birthday cards he used to give me when we were kids, back when he still pretended to care. Upstairs in my apartment, I booted up my work laptop. An avalanche of alerts flooded my screen. 72 new emails had arrived in my company inbox overnight, all marked urgent. The subject lines were all variations of the same theme: Ria J. Unprofessional conduct, client complaint, immediate review required. My blood ran cold. I opened one. The sender was an anonymous-looking email address, and the attachment was a PDF of a forged internal memo. It accused me of leaking confidential project data to one of our main competitors. The signature at the bottom was a scanned copy of my own, clearly lifted from an old expense report. With my admin privileges, I dove into the server's back-end dashboard to trace the sender's metadata. Every single one of the 72 emails had originated from the same residential IP address in Durango, Colorado. They were all time-stamped between 2 and 4 a.m. My brother still had the password to the family's old Wi-Fi router. He'd never bothered to change it after I set it up for him years ago. This spam attack wasn't random. It was targeted. Several of our major clients had been CC'd on the emails, and 3 of those accounts were now flagged in our system for immediate review. One vice president had already replied to the chain: "Please clarify the situation immediately, or we will be forced to pause our current contract." Months of geological modeling, all my painstakingly created forecasts, hung in the balance. I immediately called our IT security department. "Trace and block this IP cluster," I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could manage. The tech on the other end confirmed it. "Yep, it's all coming from one modem in Durango, Wyoming. We're quarantining all traffic from that source now." I thanked him and then blocked the sender's entire domain, but the damage had been done. My phone rang. It was Leo. His contact photo was a goofy selfie from years ago, a relic from a time I could barely remember. I let it go to voicemail. His voice, when it came through a moment later, was low and venomous. "You think freezing an account hurts us? Keep pushing, Clara, and your precious career is going to disappear. Clients really hate liars, sis." The recording ended with a sharp click. I saved the audio file and forwarded it directly to the harassment log Jessica had set up. The mailbox break-in was a clear violation of the building's security policy, so I reported it to management, sending along photos of the damage and the threatening note. They promised to review the security footage and upgrade the cameras in the garage. For the forged memo, I drafted a clear, concise counter-statement, attaching the authenticity logs from the original file, which proved its creation date and time, and sent it to all affected clients and my superiors. The digital smear campaign slowed to a trickle, but the threat was still there, hanging over me. They had moved beyond financial theft. Now they were targeting my livelihood, my reputation, my stability. I opened my project folder and began backing up every single forecast, every model, and every report to a secure, encrypted drive. One successful breach, and years of credibility could be wiped out. Another alert popped up on my screen. It was a LinkedIn message from a newly created fake profile that was using my old college photo. The message read, "Clara Sterling steals from her own family. Do not trust her." I reported the profile, took screenshots, and added it to the growing file for Jessica. The pattern was terrifyingly clear, a multi-pronged attack, physical, digital, and personal. I stood by my apartment window watching the endless stream of traffic moving below. The ranch felt much farther away than just 3 hours. They thought that creating chaos would make me retreat, that I would back down to make it stop. They couldn't have been more wrong. It was forging my resolve into something harder than steel. The next afternoon, I sat in Jessica's glass-walled conference room, the vast plains stretching out below. The door opened, and a paralegal escorted my relatives inside. Diana entered first, her eyes red and puffy, clutching a tissue in her hand. Richard followed, his shoulders slumped in a picture of defeated masculinity. Leo was last, his hood pulled up, his gaze fixed on the floor, avoiding eye contact with me. At the head of the table, her posture ramrod straight and unyielding, sat Eleanor. Jessica clicked her pen, the sound sharp in the tense silence. "This is a preliminary settlement meeting," she announced. "The terms are as follows. You will dissolve the joint household account. You will sign a legal admission to fabricating the power of attorney document. You will agree to a repayment plan for $200,000 with interest. And you will all complete mandatory financial counseling. You can either sign this agreement or we will proceed to a formal, public hearing." Diana dabbed at her eyes. "This is just so cruel. We're just trying to survive. Clara's success? It should be family money." Richard nodded. "Yeah, we kept things running at the ranch. It's been rough since the layoffs." Leo leaned forward, his voice a whine. "You froze everything. I have bills to pay. This isn't fair." Jessica coolly slid the detailed repayment schedule across the polished table. Fairness ended the moment you began exploiting her access for your own personal benefit. Eleanor cleared her throat and all eyes turned to her. She produced a blue folder from her briefcase. "This," she said, "is an addendum to my will that I drafted years ago. It includes a specific behavioral clause. It states that any proven act of coercion, manipulation, or financial abuse committed under the guise of family loyalty will result in immediate and total removal from my inheritance." She opened the folder and read aloud, her voice ringing with authority. "All assets designated for the offending party shall be immediately redirected to the non-offending heirs." Diana gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Mother, you can't do that to us. We're your family." Richard's jaw tightened. "This is extortion. After everything we've done for this family." Jessica tapped her finger on the photocopy of the forged document they had used to secure the loan. "Let's review this so-called authorization, shall we? The notary listed here, a Mr. Abernathy, had his commission expire in 2003. More importantly, he has been deceased since the filing date." Diana's face flushed a deep crimson. That must have been an oversight, an honest mistake. The paralegal at the end of the table was diligently logging the timestamps of the conversation. Leo shifted in his chair, and his hand surreptitiously slipped into his pocket. A faint, almost imperceptible beep sounded. Jessica's head snapped up. What was that? Leo froze, his eyes wide with panic. Nothing. It was just my phone. Jessica stood up and slowly circled the table, her eyes locked on him. "Empty your pocket. Now." He hesitated for a moment, then reluctantly complied, pulling out a small digital recorder, its red light blinking. "You're taping a private settlement negotiation," Jessica stated, her voice dangerously calm. "In the state of Colorado, that is illegal without the consent of all parties." Diana began to stammer. "He didn't. We wouldn't." Richard shot his son a look of pure fury. "You idiot!" Eleanor's expression hardened into granite. "That is definitive evidence of bad faith. The clause is now activated." Jessica confiscated the device and powered it off. "This recording now becomes evidence against you. It proves your intent to distort the record of this meeting at a later date. She looked directly at Diana, Richard, and Leo. The offer stands for 5 more minutes. You can sign the settlement, or we will move forward with contempt of court and conspiracy to commit fraud charges. Leo sank back into his chair, utterly defeated. Diana whispered frantically to Richard, who just shook his head in resignation. Eleanor closed her blue folder with a sense of finality. Time's up. That night, a courier delivered a heavy, cream-colored envelope to my apartment door. It was embossed with the logo of the Timberline Grill, the oldest and most respected steakhouse in Durango. Inside, there was a formally engraved invitation. Reconciliation dinner, private room, 8 p.m., hosted by Eleanor Vance. My name, along with Diana's, Richard's, and Leo's, was listed at the bottom. I made the 3-hour drive across the dark plains, the horizon a blurry line in the distance. The steakhouse smelled of aged beef, old leather, and money. A hostess led me to a private room in the back. Sliding wooden doors opened to reveal a large, circular table set for 5. Eleanor was already seated at the head, her expression completely neutral. In the center of the table sat an ornate brass-bound box with 3 distinct keyholes gleaming under the low lights. Diana and Richard arrived next, Diana wearing pearls and a smile that was clearly rehearsed. Richard was in his best shirt, looking uncomfortable. Leo slouched in last, fidgeting with the sleeve of his hoodie. Their faces visibly brightened when they saw Eleanor. "Mother," Diana cooed, leaning down to kiss her cheek. "This is just perfect. The family, all together again." Richard clapped her on the shoulder. "It's about time." Leo immediately went to the wine bottle on the table and started pouring, deliberately skipping my glass. "To fresh starts, Grandma," he said, raising his glass. Eleanor raised hers but didn't drink. "First, we will discuss the future," she said. She passed out small cards and pens. "I want each of you to write down one single sentence that represents your core family principle, the one thing that is non-negotiable to you." They complied eagerly. Diana folded her card with a serene maternal glow. Richard grunted his approval as he wrote. Leo hesitated for a moment, then quickly scribbled something and slid his card in. I wrote my own sentence, my hand steady, my mind calm. Eleanor collected the 4 folded cards and inserted them into the 3 slots on the box. She then produced 3 unique, ornate keys and turned each one in its corresponding lock. Click, click, click. The lid of the box lifted. It was empty. Their smiles faltered. "It's a scanner," Eleanor explained calmly. A section of the wall, which I had assumed was a painting, flickered to life. It was a projector screen, and their words were now displayed in large black letters for all to see. Diana's card read, "Blood is thicker than all." Richard's, "Loyalty forgives everything." Leo's, "Family shares everything." And mine, "Own what is yours." Diana's face went pale. "This is trickery." Richard slammed his fist on the table. "What is the meaning of this?" Eleanor simply pressed a button on a small hidden device. Leo's voice, amplified and chillingly clear, suddenly filled the room. "Port her number, then grab the login codes. We can drain the accounts before she even notices. It's family money, right?" It was the voicemail he had left me, his detailed plan to hack my banking app, now playing for everyone to hear. Leo went completely white. "That's a private conversation." Diana clutched Richard's arm, her voice a desperate whisper. "Mother, please." "Show some mercy." Eleanor unfolded a document on the table. "This is the final revision of my will. The addendum has been activated. There will be no shares for manipulators. Everything is to be redirected to Clara." Her pen hovered over the signature line. "You can either sign the settlement agreement from yesterday, or I will execute this will right now." The silence in the room was thick enough to choke on. Diana pleaded with her eyes. "We're your blood." Richard just stared at his hands. Leo looked blankly at the wall. Eleanor lowered the pen to the paper. Her signature flowed across the line, elegant and decisive. "The will is signed," she announced. You're done. A week later, the county courtroom in Durango was packed. The wooden benches creaked under the weight of relatives and old family friends from the ranching network, their wind-chilled faces all turned toward the front. Jessica stood beside me at the petitioner's table, our folders stacked neatly. Eleanor sat in the first row of the gallery, a silent, powerful observer. The judge entered, his robe sweeping behind him. Case J 2024-781, final hearing on the matters of injunction and trust enforcement. He scanned the docket. Evidence has been submitted. Misuse of funds logs, a forged power of attorney, records of harassment. Diana, at the respondent's table, gripped the rail, mascara streaking down her tear-stained cheeks. Richard stared at the floor. Leo was slouched so low in his chair that his hoodie shadowed his entire face. Their court-appointed lawyer shuffled his papers nervously. Your Honor, this is simply a case of family overreach. My clients acted in good faith. Jessica stepped forward. Your Honor, good faith does not involve forging legal documents or launching smear campaigns to threaten a person's career. She projected the server logs onto the courtroom screens, the IP trace leading directly back to the Durango ranch, a clear digital breadcrumb trail routing the coordinated spam and harassment after a temporary restraining order was already in place. The judge raised a single, unimpressed eyebrow. Proceed, Ms. Thorne. Jessica methodically detailed the financial audit, showing the $200,000 that had been diverted from my deposits to fund their lifestyles. We request a permanent injunction, the full dissolution of the household account, an order of full restitution, and that Mr. Sterling be placed under financial receivership to prevent any further attempts to fraudulently access funds. Diana erupted from her seat. She is destroying us. After we raised her, the gavel struck the block with a loud crack. Order, Richard muttered. Ungrateful, just loud enough for the court reporter to hear. Leo whispered something to his lawyer, who just shook his head wearily. Then Eleanor rose from her seat in the gallery without being called. The trust addendum, Your Honor, my behavioral clause. Any act of manipulation forfeits all shares. She handed the signed and notarized revision to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. The judge reviewed it for a long moment. This document has been authenticated. It will be enforced. The ruling came down swiftly and without mercy. The injunction was granted permanently. The household account was ordered to be dissolved. Full restitution of $200,000 was ordered to be secured against the equity of the family ranch, and Leo was to be placed under financial receivership with no ability to hold independent bank accounts without the explicit approval of a court-appointed trustee. Diana let out a wail. The house? Our home? Richard lunged forward as if to protest. You can't! The bailiff stepped in, firmly escorting them out of the courtroom amid a torrent of protests and sobs. Leo followed behind them, his head hanging low. The judge turned to me. Miss Sterling, the deed to the ranch will be transferred solely to you, effective immediately, on the condition that it is never again used as leverage against you by your family. I simply nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Outside, the wind whipped around the courthouse steps. The crowd of relatives who had gathered to watch now turned their backs, their faces cold and judgmental. Earlier that morning, Eleanor had pressed something into my hand. It was the original brass key to the front door of the ranch house, heavy and solid. I gripped it tightly in my fist. This door stays closed. Years of enabling, of my success being treated as a communal resource to be plundered, had ended in that courtroom. I finally understood that boundaries aren't an act of betrayal. They are an act of survival. And family isn't a license to take whatever you want. It's a bond of respect, and that respect must be earned. As I walked away from the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in a decade, knowing that my name, my work, and my future finally belonged only to me. Protect yours the same way.